Don't just invest in department mechanics. Invest in apparatus solutions that require little maintenance. On-scene solutions engineers and manufactures only the best heavy-duty cargo slides, lifetime warranted LED lighting, and in-compartment securement solutions for everyday scenes, making response swift and your crews safe. Be sure to learn about On-Scene Solutions' new 1,000-pound rated transverse toolboard for pass-through compartments, designed to make equipment accessible from both sides of the apparatus. Learn more at onscenesolutions.com. Hi, Chris Mc Loone here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of our podcast. Today, my guest is Greg Moore. He is with F.A.T Talk, that is F.A.T Talk, Fire Apparatus Technicians. It is a Facebook group that has been growing in membership. But it's a place where technicians can come and, they can network, they can ask about common problems, common diagnoses, common repairs. There's a lot of pictures on there of different challenging repairs. I think a lot of times it's the diagnosis that is really what gets some of the most traffic on there. Greg, you'll have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But today we are going to be talking about the importance of investing in your technicians. A couple weeks ago, I had on Kevin Roberts. He's the president of the EVT Certification Commission, and we talked a lot about EVTs. But in many places, not in Greg's case, but in many places, the mechanics that are working on the fire apparatus may not be EVTs, but that does not preclude fire departments from reinvesting in those personnel to keep them up to speed as much as they can on different repairs, different certifications that they can get. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about investing in your technicians. So again, Greg, welcome back. Did I get that right? It was Fire Apparatus Technician Talk, correct? F.A.T Talk, F.A.T Talk.
That is correct, yeah. Some call it F.A.T Talk, some call it F.A.T. But either way, you got it.
So many departments have EVTs, and they have technicians who are good technicians, but maybe without the EVT certification. Either way, departments must invest in their vehicle technicians. And so we had a conversation about this not too long ago, and that's what got us onto this topic for this podcast, where you said it is critical for departments to invest in their technicians. And so when you say investment in them, what are you talking about? Are you talking about monetarily, training, personnel, certification, all of these things that I didn't mention? What does that investment mean to you?
Yep. First of all, Chris, thank you very much for having me back. I really, really appreciate being here and having the opportunity. And you know from our past podcast together, I'm very passionate about training, and I always have been. And I really do see it as an investment in not only an individual, so not only the technician, but to the organization as a whole. Trained and competent people are a major asset to any organization, and even more so when the equipment they work on is of a life-saving nature. From my experience in previous jobs, I have always found that when you say the word investment, people automatically think of an investment as something more physical or tangible. So for my current job, that could represent, say, a new fire apparatus. Equipment is undoubtedly a huge investment for a department, especially in today's world. It's an investment of not only money, though, but in time. So using the fire apparatus as the example, it takes a time investment to make sure that the apparatus being spec'd is properly designed and built to meet the needs of the department, and most importantly, the area they serve. And you've had a couple of excellent guests on there talking about the time that goes into making sure that what you're building is going to suit the area that they do serve. The future service side of this new apparatus will also require a large investment of, again, both money and time during its life cycle. So I like to think about it this way. If the department invests, I'm going to say $2 million in a new ladder truck, wouldn't they want the best possibly trained technicians working on them for the next 20 plus years? Probably that truck could be in service. An investment of both money and time into their technicians will be required to make sure that they continue to get the full value out of their new apparatus throughout the years. Investment in technicians to me comes in many forms. Obviously, monetary investment is very important. Money must be budgeted to allow technicians to attend training conferences, pump schools, other manufacturer training that might be available there. For me, it does go far deeper than that, though. It's about a department investing their time and resources that they already have in place for their technicians. So, as I have always said, how can I, as a technician, confidently and efficiently fix a piece of equipment when it's broken, when I've never seen how it's supposed to work when it isn't broken? Departments have a lot of training in place for suppression staff, and obviously for good reason. A lot of this training could easily be crossed over or overlapped for a technician to be able to attend. Include your technicians when you do water delivery drills. Allow them to take a pumper to the lake and, learn how to draft and how the truck works. Let them hear how the pump sounds when it's pumping at full capacity. Understanding how the equipment works is a very key ingredient to helping technicians efficiently and correctly diagnose and repair these vehicles. These are important things that separate a certified fire apparatus technician from a standard heavy-duty equipment technician. These types of investments are not so much money-driven, but time-driven, because you're taking your technician out of the shop, or it's time that they're fixing a vehicle, but it's time that's well invested because they'll use what they learn to help keep the truck moving when they need to be moving the most. Another good investment for a department to consider would be maybe include your technician in the speccing process of a new fire apparatus. Include them in the build meetings and the inspections along the journey. And what this does for the technician is allows them to have a first-hand opportunity to see what new technology is on the truck and to ask the technical questions directly to the people who are building it as they're building it. It gives a technician a running start on what areas they have to start better educating themselves on for when the new apparatus arrives. By including technicians in this process, it gives them a first-hand opportunity to suggest simple items like extra access panels, for example. I know you talked about that on a previous podcast episode. That would allow, I think it was pump panel design, to make the truck more easily serviceable. And I can't stress how much, it might just seem like an access panel, but to a technician, sometimes that makes or breaks the deal in order to fixing that truck very quickly, or if you got to tear the whole thing apart. And I have a couple of good examples of that too throughout my career, where just having an access panel has made life a lot easier for us. There's nothing, and this one I can speak for personally, there's nothing worse for a technician than when a new truck arrives. And so it's a brand new truck, and you have some issues, growing pains right away, and everybody expects the EVT to have all the answers. That technician may have hardly seen the truck themselves. And that stress compounds even more when the truck is next to a burning building and suddenly doesn't work, or there's something not working as it should. And that's when the pressure really mounts. And this is where the training is important and really comes to play. Sometimes it's as simple as allowing your technicians the time to complete online training offered by manufacturers during work hours. Or if it can't be done during work hours due to workload, make the proper accommodations for them to complete it after hours. Many manufacturers of fire equipment have their own online training institutes, which offer a world of knowledge to the technicians working on their products. I just finished going through a couple myself for lighting, and they were fantastic. Investment in technicians can look different for every department. I just feel that no matter what, it must be realized that the investment, it just has to be made. Very important vehicles, they keep getting more and more complicated every year. And this requires a bigger investment in training in no matter what capacity you take that investment to be.
A couple of things you mentioned there. First was taking the technician, out during training for drafting or things like that. I hadn't thought of that before, and there really is a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge that, let's just use pumpers as the example. Pump operators have where you mentioned the sound of the truck. If they're driving those things often enough, they're going to know every sound. They're going to know as they're driving if there's something wrong. Something's just not going to sound right. But also on the fire ground, what the pumps sound like as they're running. What, I mean, an easy one is, when if you haven't been backed up with water yet, very quickly when the pumper's out of water. Just things of that nature that I had never thought of before that could really be beneficial to a technician, especially as they're making their repairs. The other thing, and you hit on this, and we have talked about it in the past, but there was another aspect of it that I hadn't thought of. When you bring the technician into the specification process, yes, they make suggestions about, for example, the access panels. They can also say like, yeah, that, you may think that's a great idea, but when that comes into the shop, it's going to be almost impossible to fix. It's going to take forever because of where you located this. That rig is going to be out of service a prolonged period of time. But also, it gives those technicians a sense of ownership in the rig when it arrives, to be repaired. And like you said, sometimes they haven't seen it yet. Wouldn't it be great, to know that, I know exactly where that particular component is. I told them where to put it, that kind of thing. So it really was that you brought up a couple of really good points. And, like I said, that second one, I hadn't thought of the ownership, the ownership assumption aspect of it either.
I didn't think of that either. That's a really good point. It's a job that you certainly. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's a job that I certainly take pride in, and that involves every aspect of it. So being involved with helping with that process certainly would just add to that. So
now, when you talk about that investment, just talk. I guess in a way, where I was kind of going with this question is sort of take us through, how has the progression been over the years for you with that investment? Was there a difference between what sort of investment or support was available maybe 10 or 15 years ago versus what you are seeing today, not only in your own department, but neighboring departments as well?
I would imagine people have different answers to this. The simple answer for me is there has to be. This particular question is very interesting to me, and it brings back a lot of memories from my previous automotive repair life, because I spent 20 years repairing automobiles. People would always say to me, the internal combustion engine has been the same for 100 years. Suck in fuel and air, squeeze it, burn it to make power, and spit out the exhaust. And they're not wrong. Like, my reply has always been the same. It does do that, but the way the engine does this, that's what changes. And it changes almost every year, it seems. The wiring, the filters, the technology, how fuel is delivered, how the exhaust is after treated in the last, 10 years has been huge. It's all changed, and it continues to change year after year as time marches on. And if a technician doesn't keep up with that technology, then they will eventually get left behind. And that's myself included. If I don't study, if I don't keep up on the latest technologies, I get left behind just like anybody else. For a long time, I guess in my automotive life for a long time, training was almost stagnant. Like, they figured you knew what you knew, and every now and again, something new would come out and they'd send you for training. But that can't be the way it is anymore. I mean, this is not only detrimental to a technician, because skills are certainly perishable over time, but it's also detrimental to a department that we serve, that we need to be able to repair these trucks as fast and efficiently as we can. And they had to be repaired correctly because of what they do. So when I take this logic and apply it to my current career, I mean, a fire apparatus is no different. Sure, for the most part, the internal combustion engine still drives the pump, which, to move water. This part is still very much true. But the systems that make that engine work to pump the water have certainly changed in the past 20 years. Think back 20 years ago. I mean, did you ever think you would see a gas-powered chainsaw that had a diagnostic port? Because I didn't. But now when you look at the newer Stihl chainsaws, they're equipped with electronic fuel injection, electronic control units, and they're capable of storing fault codes. These fault codes require diagnostic software to access them. The basic principles of the saw is still the same. It burns fuel, it cuts whatever's in its path. But how it achieves this has certainly changed a lot and will continue to change. Technology is ever changing and at a steady pace. And that's true for any industry. And we as technicians have to stay up to date with it. Where one time you could probably go a longer period of time without being trained, that's not the way it is anymore. There's, between the technology, the electronics, everything that goes with it, constant updating is definitely required to stay sharp at it. So,
do you have any examples where that you can look at where you go, where you sit there and go, investing in the technicians definitely paid off in this particular instance?
I do. I have a real life example from a few years back, and it's about me and how a time investment by my employer helped me catch a problem before it turned into a complete failure. And it references what we spoke about earlier about understanding how the pump sounds and how it feels, that sort of thing. I mentioned in our last podcast together, I'm not a firefighter. So when I started as a EVT, I had no idea how a pump was supposed to sound. I mean, I worked on lots of mechanical things in my life, lots of automobiles, pickup trucks, some bigger trucks, but never a fire truck. So when I first came, I was like, how is this pump supposed to sound? How is it supposed to pump water? I was eager to learn. I was brand new to the world of fire trucks. So I spent every minute I could learning about how these trucks worked. And I sat in on whatever department offered training I could. And I asked senior operators to teach me how the pump worked, what we're listening for, how it sounds when it's under full load. And I listened to the pump when it was running. And I tried my best to always remember the sounds that it makes when it was pumping. And, it was my department that allowed me to do this, to, send me out with the guys when they're out drafting from a pond or something. Or I did portable pump training one day when they were having a class, water delivery class. Like, they allowed me the time to leave the shop and go attend these. And this was just in-house training that fire suppression staff was taking. I just joined in. So one day, just while attending, I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I was just listening to the truck pumping water, and it just didn't sound right. Like, it didn't sound like what I'd been listening to for the last several months. There was a bunch of extra noises that I hadn't heard before, and I ended up going back and consulting with my supervisor about what I'd heard, and he immediately took the truck out of service for us to investigate it a bit further. And as it turned out, when I got it back to the shop and we ended up pulling some things apart, we had two bearings in the pump transmission that were pretty well ready to fail. And we ended up rebuilding that pump transmission from the top to bottom. The main takeaway from that for me was that because of that investment time that they gave me to spend with the pumps and to learn how they sound and to attend training that was going on anyway, it allowed me to gain the knowledge to catch that potentially serious problem before it happened in a much more urgent setting. So I'm very grateful for that. And, that's just one of many examples I would imagine that other people would have as well. But you can apply it to just stuff that's already in place. You learn from it and you apply it to everyday life as an EVT.
Now, based on just that example, it sounds like your department is pretty progressive with, keeping its EVTs up to speed, making the investments that you've been talking about. But that's probably not the same for every department. So how would you coach a fleet manager that needs his fire department to invest in his technicians, but isn't sure how to go about it? I would imagine there's got to be some sort of, this is your ROI that you're going to get out of this if you make this investment in time, in training, et cetera. So how would you coach a fleet manager who's trying to get his department or her department to make that investment in its technicians?
Yeah, I often wonder, I wondered if I was the right person to answer this question, given that I've never held an official management position, but I certainly understand they have a lot of pressures and limitations from above them. And as well as a lot of departments have collective agreements in place that they have to follow and adhere to. I have, however, read countless leadership books over my years, and the one thing that has always rang through as a common theme for me is that if a person doesn't believe in something themselves, then it will be extremely difficult for them to convince others to believe in it. So, one book had taught me knowing the mission, understanding the mission, and most importantly, believing in the mission are the first steps of any leader who wishes to successfully execute any mission. And this would be my humble advice to any shop foreman or fleet manager who wishes to create a positive training culture within their shop. When a fleet manager understands and values the importance of the training investment being made into their technicians, it will make it far easier for them to help advocate for them when it comes to acquiring support, funding, that sort of thing from upper management for the training. In my honest opinion, and I guess my humble opinion, creating and maintaining this kind of positive pro-training environment will definitely make the technician far more comfortable in coming forward and looking for the specific training or access to training resources in the future. And you got to start that conversation. So you got to get everybody on board. And once they know this is the direction we want to go, it just makes, at least I would feel it would make seeking that funding or support far more easier in the long run.
Now, how about shops that are not dedicated specifically to emergency vehicles? So, in some municipalities, the Department of Public Works does the entire fleet for the entire municipality. It could be dump trucks one day, flush trucks another day, fire trucks another day. How would you suggest navigating the topic of investing in technicians when the technicians are not only working on fire apparatus?
Yeah, so this was another great question and one that admittedly I don't have a lot of experience with. I work for a department where the fire apparatus vehicles are serviced in their own separate garage. The emergency vehicle technicians, we work separately from the main city depot technicians. So in our shop, the technicians are required to be or to become certified EVTs through the EVT CC testing program. And like you had just said, I also know there are a lot of municipalities where there's only one maintenance facility. So as you had mentioned, the technicians work on both the emergency vehicles. They work, as emergency vehicle technicians and heavy equipment technicians. Like literally, as you just spoke of, they literally could be working on any piece of equipment that municipality owns. And for some, that means one day they've got a lawnmower in their bay and the next day they got a fire truck. I know every municipality is going to vary on the way they do things. One thing I do have to say is that I know that these technicians are some of the most experienced and knowledge technicians you will ever find anywhere. And that is due to their exposure of such a wide array of equipment that they diagnose and repair on a daily basis. They are using the full range of their skill sets because literally one day you're doing a lawnmower and the next day you're doing a fire truck, just as an example. Given that I didn't have a whole lot of experience in this area, I did reach out to the members of F.A.T Talk, and I did ask their feedback on how things were done in their municipal shops, if they were set up this way. And mostly it came down to most shops have a set number of people certified to be able to work on the fire apparatus. Mm-hmm. These people could certainly do other work all day if there was no fire apparatus repair, available. But they would be the go-to technicians for the fire apparatus repair. I guess my best piece of advice for technicians wanting to do EVT work in these settings is to ensure that your management is well aware that you are interested in expanding your training and certifications. This way, if there ever does become a sudden need for fire apparatus technicians, well, they know they have interested technicians already. I would also encourage management to monitor how busy their EVTs are and be proactive in training more people if they notice the workload increases. And this could give you the head start you need to go through the proper channels of your shop to get more people trained and certified as an EVT.
I've often said that that we are living in an era right now, and every era this was the case, but right now we are living in the most technologically advanced era for fire trucks, fire apparatus than we ever have before. I've talked a number of times about our 81 rig that we have that we're sort of putting back together to be kind of a showpiece, to be that community vehicle, not to put in service, but to use in parades and antiques and all that. And you look at it then, and sometimes you're like, boy, this was so simple. It was just so much simpler to work on, so much simpler to understand what was going on. In today's rigs, they are so sophisticated. They work flawlessly most of the time, but they are very, very sophisticated. And sometimes that level of sophistication might be lost on some of our fire chiefs. And so, how does an apparatus shop lead educate fire chiefs about the complexity of today's rigs? That there is so much to learn. And I guess where I'm going with that is, sending you out to get the training, versus bringing it in, or versus only, like we've talked about investment of time and training and stuff at the department. But how do you educate them to say, I've got to get out and see this in other places and go get some advanced training, because these things are truly, more sophisticated than they ever have been.
I guess to prelude to my answer, like for me, I'm a very visual, hands-on learner. So there's something to be said. I mean, I certainly read a lot, but there's something to be said about reading something versus having that something in front of you apart. I'll use pump school, for example. You can read about how a pump comes apart, goes together, what it does all day long. When you've got that pump in front of you apart in 100 pieces, and you have an instructor, a qualified instructor, showing you what each piece does, or is, and what it does. When you are diagnosing problems, so if you have an issue with the pump, you can visually put those pieces together in your head. Okay, so we have this going on. We know that's attached to that. Like the thought process just builds a lot more when it's in person. And that's certainly the way I learn much more effectively. But I currently don't work in a shop lead position myself, nor does my current workplace have one other than our direct supervisor. So I'm basing my answer solely on my own thoughts and from what I've learned through all the leadership books and articles I've read over the years. And what I've found with dealing with different people throughout the years is that if the person isn't really well versed or familiar in a particular area, it's sometimes hard to get them to fully understand, why advanced and continuing training is important. I think back to a job interview I once had with a major company, and I sat down for the interview with 2 human resources staff. They were very well dressed in nice clothing, far nicer clothing than I had or would ever wear in a garage. They had fancy briefcases. I remember all that. And they started asking me a bunch of, pre-written questions, which they had example answers written for or something they were supposed to reference. And what they were looking for was for me, as long as I said something along close to what was written on their paper, I got a check mark. Same thing went for my credentials. As long as I had the piece of paper, that was where the conversation ended. And these were people who were very familiar with working in an office environment, not a garage. So when I would try to expand on my answers or to give examples from experience, I was more or less asked to stick to the direct question because they didn't quite understand the technical side of the job. Their job was just the hiring process. And I find this can be true sometimes for the fire department. If you have a fire chief who isn't mechanically inclined to regards of how the vehicle works, and I don't mean that in any kind of negative way. Some people just aren't mechanically inclined and are very smart in other ways. But it's hard for them to understand why. It might be hard for them to understand why you're asking for money for training if you already meet the credentials on paper. So, for example, if a fire chief knows your shop already has EVT certified technicians, it can be hard for them to understand why they have to set aside such a large piece of their budget for external training or internal training. The credentials are already in place. And what I've found throughout my life is that people can get fixated on the fact that the original principles of something never changes, rather than focusing on the means of how it's done changes. And it's kind of like the exact example I just gave of the internal combustion engine. The principle of the internal combustion engine, it's been around for 100 years. And what has changed, and more importantly keeps changing, is the technology of what makes that happen. And this is the purpose of continuously training year after year. And I guess it could be similar when talking about firefighting. The principle hasn't changed. I mean, put the wet stuff on the red stuff, as I've heard in a couple of books I've been reading about it. But what has changed is the way that buildings are built, that the building materials that are used, the chemicals, and one of the most important things, the temperature at which your stuff burns at. Like, it's insane. And it's continuously changing and requires ongoing training to learn new tactics, procedures, and stay sharp, and more importantly, stay safe. So what I try to do with people is I try to find a common level playing field with the other person that you can use to help paint a comparison to help them understand better. So, for example, if your fire chief is very knowledgeable in computers, I would ask them their thoughts or how they feel if computer technicians require ongoing training. Most likely their answer is going to be yes, because they understand the ever-changing technology, the landscape of the technology of computers. And then you can sort of use that understanding to try to help them relate to the points at which you're trying to make. It's just about helping them understand why you want what you're asking for and why it's so important and critical. And if you can relate it to something, if you can find some level playing ground there just to reference or compare the two, then I have found in the past you'll have great success with that. And one last point I'll make on that topic, I have found that giving people examples of how the investment will benefit the organization is a great way to show them that you've actually done your homework and you're not just blindly asking for a bag of money. In the case of the fire department, they need apparatuses and service for the department's front line. You can explain clearly to them that investing in a technician in their training helps make technicians more knowledgeable. More knowledgeable technicians makes them better equipped to repair the apparatus more efficiently. And thus you have less out of service time. When, I find when people can relate to what you're asking for and they can understand the potential, we'll say, reward, they're more likely to listen and actually hear, more importantly, hear your expertise and seriously consider providing what you are requesting for them. And that's just some of the stuff I've picked up throughout my life so far.
So we've talked about a lot of specifics here today. Do you have any general comments about the importance of investing, of departments investing in their technicians before we get into hopefully a pretty good example of a recent challenging job? Do you have any general comments about how or about departments investing in their technicians?
Yeah, pretty much. It just sums down to, and it could be the same for technicians or firefighters. When it counts, you want the best people, the best trained people at your side. And this includes every area of a fire department, including the technicians. It is them who keep the trucks rolling when they are needed the most. And I think creating and supporting a positive, welcoming, and inviting culture of continuous training should be high on the priority list of any fleet manager or fire department. I mean, for technicians, things become real very fast on a fire when an apparatus isn't working as it should, and now the pressure is there to diagnose it because the building next to it is on fire. So we kind of need this truck to work. And this is where you pull from your experiences and your training and your skills. This is where all this, Frank, I can never pronounce his last name, Verscuso. I'm listening to one of his books there now. And he talks about when firefighters are actually in the building in that, life-threatening situation, this is what they train for. Well, I guess on a little bit of a lesser scale, that's what mechanics train for that moment when the truck breaks down and people are literally depending on it. And in my humble opinion, that's where the training pays off the most. And I would just like to say I'd encourage any technician to take it upon themselves to self-educate as much as you can. I mean, I don't mean spend your own money on doing all kinds of extra courses. It could be as simple as open YouTube and just watch a few minutes of the videos that equipment manufacturers have posted. I mean, read an article from a magazine geared towards technicians. Good example of this would be The Rig, which is geared towards apparatus and the technicians who keep them rolling. I try to read a chapter or two from a book every day. I don't always succeed, but I try. Like currently I'm reading Andy Sakadato's new book on water thievery, on water delivery. So far, it's a great book. It's just anything to keep myself knowledgeable. Seek out potential courses and training that you could present to your employer for possible funding to complete. I guess the important thing is to remember, and I've said it for many things in my life, sometimes the smallest of ripples turn into the biggest of waves. And the same is definitely true for training.
It's the passion that you have for this is coming out very. It's very identifiable with just everything you just said. And I've often said that whenever I have visited apparatus manufacturers, it's always been very impressive. No matter which one I've been at, it's always very impressive to me how seriously the people that are putting those trucks together take what they're doing, because they know that what they are putting together is going to be used in the service of saving lives. And I think it's critically important that, the folks like me who ride on these trucks, who operate these trucks, understand that same sort of passion is present at the shops, that you all take your jobs incredibly seriously to ensure that we can do ours when lives are on the line. So believe me when I tell you that the passion you have for this really showed itself in that last answer you just gave.
I always tell people, if you never know when you're going to be the one needing the emergency vehicle. And I can actually, just one little quick last point I'll make. And I've always said, if you want to understand the importance of something, relate it to a personal experience or an event. And I can remember when my daughter was a year old, she had a medical event and I needed to call an ambulance. And I waited 18 minutes for an ambulance, which, isn't a huge amount of time compared to what I've heard some people waiting. But let me tell you, that was the longest 18 minutes of my life, feeling very helpless. Mm-hmm. And I've often read news articles from all over the world about ambulance response times being high, the amount of time it takes to get an ambulance to you because of the out of service numbers. And anything you can do to help train yourself to keep these vehicles rolling, and decrease their downtime makes a difference. And as I found out, you will never know when you never know when you're going to be the one waiting for that emergency vehicle to arrive. And I mean, to this day, my daughter will be 3 now. I still think of that event every time, and I think about how I felt when I'm fixing these vehicles. And I want to do whatever I can to help prevent someone else from going through that.
For sure, and added incentive there. Just that you keep in the back of your mind, and it really is that I can't speak to that specifically about a loved one having something, but I know that I have been first on location at a fire before the first rigs get there, and that time waiting, really, I mean, it seems certainly much longer than it actually is, but it is a helpless feeling when you're standing there, ready to command, but and there's fire blowing out of a second floor window, and you're you can hear the sirens, they're coming, but you're waiting. But before I let you go, Greg, I was curious, have there been any recent challenging jobs that have come into your shop, either diagnosing what the problem is or repairing it? I've often the last fire truck training conference I was at, it was amazing to me just how common a lot of the problems can be. Where I would be sitting there in a classroom, just listening to the chatter around me, and there would be someone from the West Coast talking about a problem they had, and someone on the East Coast had the same exact problem, and they were able to commiserate and about the different solutions that they had. And so that's why I bring this question up. Have there been any challenging jobs recently?
Yeah, well, that is certainly an excellent point. And that's the beauty of all these technicians meeting together in a community, is that just because this is your first time seeing a problem, someone on the other side of the planet may have had the exact same problem. And sometimes it's just that one key piece of information that'll lead you to the answer to your problem. In the shop I work at, of course, every day is different. I mentioned that on the last episode we had, and that is probably one of the things I love the very most about my job. The range of jobs and equipment can be so vast sometimes, and I feel it gives me a great opportunity to call on many skill sets. I have a job that sticks out. Well, I don't know if sticks out or sounds out is the right word, but we'll say sticks out. Most recently, we had a ladder truck in which the air horn would randomly activate. And when I say activate, it would just lock on and stay on anytime the ignition was placed in the on position. Nothing the officers would do to try to make the horn stop would work, except for turn the ignition off, which doesn't help if you're trying to get back to a fire station or get somewhere. So that was a fun job because it really forced you to look at the truck as a whole and think about what could be doing that, what could be turning on that air horn. And, there's obviously more than just the push button in the wheel. You got to think, VMUX screens, and is there anything on the pump panel? And that's just this thought process led me to, we do obviously have a button on the pump panel that's how they communicate with the air horn, as many fire departments do. And through the diagnosis, it ended up being that the pump panel button was shorted in the on position. And I guess there was some water in it at that particular time. It would only activate every so often, but when it turned on, it stayed on, and it was very, very loud. Pardon me. I will add that particular day I didn't have my laptop with me, but that would have been a great example of where diagnosing a multiplex truck would have been far easier than diagnosing a traditionally wired truck. And we've talked about it loosely, is that I'm very pro multiplexing when it comes to these trucks. And situations like this is where I feel a multiplex system is much easier to help pinpoint inputs and outputs, because you can see on the screen what is activated. So, for example, I may have been able to go into the screen and look right away, and it would have said pump panel switch active or something along those lines. That would give me an idea right away where to go look. And I've used the multiplexing advantage for diagnosing in that particular way many times now. And I know a lot of people, it's an ongoing debate, multiplex or traditional wiring. But we could definitely do a separate episode on that sometime on the topic of multiplexing. So
absolutely, I look forward to that one, because that can be a lightning rod. Multiplexing versus traditional hardwiring, and everything you were just talking about made me think of the article that we ran on the rig for you just recently about the importance of visual inspection. And taking a look at everything. And for those who haven't seen it yet, make sure you go to rigspot.com. It's one of the lead stores. It should still be right there on the homepage, and take a look at that. That was in the case there. It was definitely a case where just kind of slowing down and just kind of taking it all in and looking at kind of like with a broad view, and not getting any tunnel vision on any particular area really does help you out in the end. It sounds like that could have been, the visual inspection here could have just been, maybe you weren't even thinking about the pump panel, but as you got over there, there's that switch. I wonder if that's it. That it could be as simple as that.
I'm an electrical guy by nature. That was the work I enjoyed doing in my automotive career as well. And one thing I always noticed was that the tunnel vision is almost instant, especially if you're not comfortable with electrical work, because automatically you start to focus. It must be the computer. It must be this, like you think big. And I have time and time again, I've humbly found that sometimes it's the smallest things cause the biggest of problems. And sometimes they're right in front of your face. So in the case of the article that I wrote for the rig, that problem literally was right in front of my face. When I first did the visual inspection, I didn't quite recognize it. But as I started seeing what was going on with the truck, that visual inspection is what flashed back in my mind. And then knowing what that component could do, it led me to find the trouble with the truck. So sometimes it's best to just slow down. I always say step back, take a very large look at everything. Don't just assume, don't shoot for the heart, basically. Sometimes it's the simplest of problems that cause the biggest problems, or the simplest of issues that can cause the biggest problems.
Well, Greg, I want to thank you again for sitting in with me today. But before I let you go, would you care to just refresh everybody on the Facebook group and just kind of review it real quick for everybody and let them know how to get over to it?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, F.A.T. Talk is an online community for fire apparatus technicians. It was founded 4 years ago. And as I think I might have mentioned earlier, F.A.T. Talk stands for Fire Apparatus Technician Talk. It's often referred to by just the letters F.A.T. As of this morning, we were currently just a little over 3,500 members strong. And it consists, part that I guess I'm really proud of is it consists of quite a melting pot of technicians, manufacturer representatives, and many other subject matter experts there. And the mandate of the community is that it is a safe place for technicians to learn, network, help each other solve the problems that we face with these fire apparatuses on a daily basis. And I'm extremely proud of what the community has grown into, and I'm more proud of the people within it. The level of professionalism at which they conduct themselves and their continuing willingness to help others within the community is just commendable. I've currently been working on writing some articles, which I'm going to be sending out. I'm attempting to set up like a monthly little newsletter for group members, whoever wants to sign up to it. Pay attention. There'll be a link soon just to stick your email in. Be no spam. It'll just be me sending an email, or if there's an update with the group or I'm going to go live or something like that, I would just send out an email. And I'm also going to be sharing these with the Rig magazine for them to review and see if they're interested in posting. So I encourage everybody just to keep an eye out for that stuff. It is a Facebook group community. You can search F.A.T, F put a period in between, F.A.T. And you can also go to fattalk.ca. Website's currently in the works. It's a little rough, but I'm getting there. So one day at a time.
All right.
And Chris, if I could just take a quick second, I wanted to remind all technicians that it's EVT testing season again. So, and I wanted to wish a sincere good luck to each and every single technician writing. And I myself am writing for research this year. So I know you have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in studying and preparing for these exams. And I want you to remember that even if you take the test and you don't achieve a passing grade, and that's something I always worried about when I wrote these tests, your efforts are not a lost cause. You have already started building a foundation of information and knowledge that will make studying for the test the next time far easier. Remember, some of the smartest and most experienced technicians, they're just not good test takers. And it doesn't make them a failure, and it doesn't make you a failure. So just keep going. And, I believe in you all. Just keep going. You'll get there.
Perfect. Well, great. Thank you again, Greg, for sitting down with me today. If there are topics that you'd like me to address with Greg, or if you have another maintenance topic that we haven't hit on yet, please let me know. I'm at chris.mcloone@clarionevents.com. If you'd like to see previous podcasts, all of our podcasts are archived at fireapparatusmagazine.com/podcast, so you can see them there. Also, the ones that are directly related to maintenance, we have been also sharing on our microsite, The Rig. That's at www.rigspot.com. So again, this has been Chris Mc Loone along with Greg Moore. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks, Chris. Looking forward to the next one.